Good evening, brothers and sisters. This is your boy BC. Welcome back to another Based LDS video. And you'll have to forgive me. I'm a little cold right now, so I'm fidgety trying to warm up. The missionaries in our area came over because they got a flat. They needed a dry place to change their tires, so they got it up into our garage. And our garage is not lit, nor is it heated. And we had to fight a scissor jack to put the end of the tail end of their truck into the air to change a tire. And it was not the warmest nor funnest experience, but we got them some cocoa, got them out. And I had not planned on making this video tonight. I wanted to calm down and give things 24 hours to settle. See if I feel better about what I read today. And I don't, and I'm not going to, because I don't like it. And I do think this is not an LDS video. The last couple videos, Deion Sanders, have not been LDS based, but they are things that affect the LDS community. And they're representative of the progressive creep into our culture to destroy the culture, to destroy Western civilization. Because they're short-sighted fools. And what I heard yesterday, that I've pondered on all day today, it's got my blood boiling. And for many it's small and it's petty, but it's not small and petty to me because I love books. I love to read. I love that my youngest daughter and my oldest daughter love to read. I love that reading sparks imagination, sparks passion, lights curiosity. And I hate the slow creep in on our culture that comes for the children. These simple-minded fools that think that they know better, with little thought or care to what they're doing and what they have done already. In the name of inclusivity and sensitivity. I grew up reading books. Reading took me to different places and different times. I learned to imagine faraway places and people using my mind's eye. And the woke scolds in certain facets of the publishing world are coming for your children to keep them from experiencing escape, to keep them from harm and trauma through rough words, through hard ideas. These anti-Socratics. And I point to the Socrates because that's what killed him, as the charge by the Athenians that Socrates was corrupting the youth. Socrates, all his crime was, think about what they're telling you. Do they really know what they're saying? And he was a champion for religion and democracy in the Athenian way. But he threatened their power and they came for him. And the progressive come for anyone who threatened their power. And they hate conservatives because we stand up and we say no. And so we're public enemy number one, and we're racist, and we're bigot, and we're homophobic, and transphobic, and sexist, misogynist, all these things. And to prevent a rise in conservative children, they come after conservative ideas that children might read. Sometimes the ideas aren't even all that conservative. But they are creative, and they're imaginative, and they're fun. And they need to stifle that. They need conformity of thought. And by now you're like, what is this man talking about? And I want to talk about one of the greatest writers in children's literature, Roald Dahl. And some of you might say, Roald who? He wrote books in the 50s and 60s. Many of them were turned into movies. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, BFG, James and the Giant Peach. Those are the ones I was familiar with. My daughter right now, I am thrilled to death. When I tuck her in at night, right now she's reading to me a chapter a night from James and the Giant Peach. We just finished chapter 22, where the silkworm is spinning silk and they're using the earthworm as bait to lure seagulls in so that they might harness the seagulls to pull their giant peach out of the ocean so that the sharks don't eat them. What creativity. What genius. This man wrote with an understanding of a child's mind's eye. Think of how things are as a child. How big everything was when you were a child. How exciting everything was. So much was new. So much was unseen and undiscovered. Even the mundane through a child's eye was sometimes something to behold. From the City Journal, Boulders Return. Boulder was a man who I believe had the best of intentions. He and his sister felt that there were certain great works that needed to be more accessible to the family. And so they created and edited the Family Shakespeare, a version from the Bard which changed words and phrases so that they were more inclusive for children to understand and would do them less harm. They did the same thing with Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And the Boulders, because they wanted to make these works, other works too, more accessible to the public, I think they're the General Institute of Censorship. People laugh at the Boulders. And in fact, I talked to a librarian today. She thinks this is nonsense. She doesn't know about Dahl, but she thinks about this censorship as nonsense. Roald Dahl, whose books have sold 250 million copies worldwide. He was J.K. Rowling before J.K. Rowling. Because his language transgresses today's modern thought. Puffin Books is going through and re-editing problematic expressions in his books. Augustus Gloop, the enormously fat child, is now just enormous. Do you know how many connotations enormous takes on? But in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, enormously fat gives you an exact idea that the boy is a glutton. Not a behemoth of muscle or something, a glutton. But we can't have people fat shaming, can we? There will be amendments coming through all of his books. Father and mother have become offensive because maybe there are orphans, but maybe you don't have a mother and a father. You have daddy and daddy, or mommy and mommy. Think about that. Maybe mommy doesn't have a dressing table. Maybe there's just a dressing table. And father's tool shed, that tool shed where your father kept tools, is now just the tool shed. Anybody can put tools there. It's no longer dad's. It no longer has an image of something dad worked in and dad's memories. Dad on the car. Anybody can work on the car now. And anybody can. But when you think about it, there's a difference between dad's car and mom's car. Look at my wife and I's vehicles. You know which one I'm in and which one she's in. Maybe we won't be talking about waving fat arms, instead just waving arms. ladies and gentlemen become folks because we're all androgynous now. They ask here, what would be done on Adventures in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass? The White Rabbit, for example, would be the crossbred rabbit. The White Queen, that's supremacy for sure. The Mad Hatter, the neurodiverse Hatter. Okay, I like that one. And off with his head would become community service. Oh, but heck, maybe that would still be too rough. After all, do we really know? Shouldn't we know first who's being given community service? Maybe they need to be let off. This is an insult to children. And it is. This is an insult to Roald Dahl. And unfortunately, Netflix, the Roald Dahl estate, and Puffin Books have become woke scolds that decide children need to be protected. They don't need to have their vocabulary sharpened. They don't need to have their imagination broadened. They don't need to have their creativity encouraged. The last line here from Theodore Dalrymple's article in City Journal, again, Theodore Dalrymple in City Journal. Miss Bowdler was merely puritanical. The sensitivity readers combined puritanism with political tyranny. Miss Bowdler meet Joseph Stalin, and that's what this is. They're coming for your children. Now, when I first heard this story, they were laying the blame largely at Netflix, and it had to do with copyright laws. You see, when Amazon absolutely ruined The Lord of the Rings with that abomination, where they twisted the character of... I can't even think of her name now. But when they warped and they twisted the characters. I'm so mad. And they race swap and they gender swap and say, oh, well, these things aren't important. And yes, they need to be done for diversity, because if you don't see yourself in a movie or a book, then it's problematic. So here we're doing away with things that might make characters in books become problematic. But the person talking about this, Helen Dale, discussed copyright law. And Netflix had just spent £650 million to acquire the entirety of the Roald Dahl collection from his estate. The entirety. See, Tolkien only leased a portion of The Lord of the Rings to Amazon. So Amazon could not... They could create a story, but they could not directly make another Lord of the Rings or another Hobbit or another Silmarillion. They sold notes and information so that stories could be created. And then they bastardized the characters in the story. This goes above and beyond that. This goes above and beyond the things they do to our historical characters. The Black Anne Boleyn, the Black Achilles. And this isn't about black characters and things, I don't care. But when you read the Iliad and fair-haired Achilles is replaced with charcoal black Achilles. When Jarl Håkonsson in the Vikings TV show and in history is a Dane, a male and a Dane is replaced with a black female. This isn't about racism. This is about retrograding all of our literature. This is the sick homogenization of culture. This is the destroying of creativity. I'm waiting to see fat, white, 51-year-old Shaka Zulu. I noticed they don't do anything to the Chinese characters or the Japanese. Well, okay, Tom Cruise was a samurai, but he didn't replace a Japanese guy. But they talked about Netflix buying this and copyright laws, and they can go through and do anything they want, something that couldn't be done in other books because they didn't own entire properties. And here, Netflix bought the entire property. And in the wake of the backlash that Netflix has gotten, Puffin Books says, "We want to ensure Roald Dahl's wonderful stories and characters continue to be enjoyed by all children today. When publishing new print runs of books written years ago, it's not unusual to review the language used alongside updating other details, including a book's cover and page layout. This is not the cover and page layout being changed. Our guiding principle throughout has been to maintain the storylines, characters, and irreverence and the sharp-edged spirit of the original text." And we're going to look into some changes, and you're going to see that that's a lie. "Any changes made have been small and carefully considered." Lie. "As part of our process to review the language used, we worked in partnership with the Inclusive Minds, a collective for people who are passionate about inclusion and accessibility in children's literature." Diversity, equity, inclusion. Die. Die must die. The current review began in 2020 before Dahl was acquired by Netflix. It was led by Puffin and Roald Dahl Story Company together. See, Roald Dahl Story Company is the when Dahl died, his works passed down into a, for lack of a better word, a trust. Kind of like the Tolkien estate runs Tolkien's works for Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, Silmarillion and all those. Dahl estate just sold everything to Netflix outright. Done. Here, we can't. It's yours. £650 million. That's a lot of money. It is. So Puffin's running cover for Netflix. I do. I think it's for Netflix. And here's Wall Street Journal gives you 5 changes. The British publisher of Roald Dahl's books has made hundreds of changes to the text in an effort to make the language more acceptable to contemporary readers. Britain's conservative government, as well as some high-profile authors and free speech advocates, have criticized the modifications. Good. And we need to hear from more than just the British. We need to hear from everybody. So let's hear some changes. Among the changes to the latest edition of Mr. Dahl's books, the gluttonous boy Augustus Gloop in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is no longer described as enormously fat and is now just enormous. I'm sorry, you used the word gluttonous here. This is Wall Street Journal. You have to use gluttonous to describe the type of enormous that Augustus Gloop is. Enormously fat, another good term for gluttonous. Now he's just enormous. Think of how many versions of enormous there can be. Cloud men in James and the Giant Peach are now cloud people. Because, hey, how dare we infer gender? A reference in The Witches to putting people in a meat grinder is removed. That's supposed to tell you how evil, how despicable these people are. How they want it. We could round them all up and put them in the meat grinder. Well, let's just take that out because we don't want the witches to seem too wicked, do we? Now, I have not read The Witches. I'm assuming they're women, because witch. Maybe I'm wrong to assume the gender. We should just. The non binary magic practicing users would never put anyone in a meat grinder. Unless you're in Stalinist Russia, Maoist China, Pol Pot, Vietnam. No, you would never do that. No one would do that. That's white patriarchy. That's what the white people do. So that's just, again, these are the small details that make no difference to the story. You're adding character. You're adding information to the type of person that these references are made to. In Matilda, Miss Trunchbull's great horsey face simply becomes her face. Think of that. Yeah, there's no difference at all between great horsey face and just face. And they're doing the same thing in James and the Giant Peach with Sponge and Spiker. They're not tall and skinny and greasy, and they're not short, fat, and squatting. No, it's just, they're women. BFG, flashing black eyes, are now just flashing eyes. Is black eyes racist now? Kind of like Dungeons and Dragons? The orcs represent black people. What kind of racist do you have to be to see that orcs are black people? Orcs have been orcs as long as anyone I've known has played the game, and I don't play the game. I'm not complaining about this, but I do laugh at the fact that the non-racists out there are the only ones who see the racism. Salman Rushdie, the Indian-born British author whose novels were banned in scores of Islamic countries for alleged blasphemy and who was attacked by a knife-wielding assailant last year, said the changes were unwarranted. Roald Dahl was no angel, but this is absurd censorship. Rushdie wrote on Twitter, Puffin Books and the Dahl estate should be shamed. And they should be. These are disgusting people, and they're coming for your kids. And it's about time we stood up and we pushed back. Because if they come for children's books, maybe they're going to come after other stuff. Now, here's one. Mr. Dahl's books were controversial even soon after they were published. Yes, they were. In the first edition of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Oompa Loompas were black pygmies enslaved by Willy Wonka from the darkest parts of the African jungle. Mr. Dahl himself rewrote the characters in the late 1960s, but the author did that. Not the woke scolds thereafter. This is not the author's changes. These are not the changes the author would make, because Dahl wrote with a child in mind. These people write with inclusivity in mind. The amalgamation of all children that does not exist. And you're asking yourself, why does this matter? This is based LDS. Why are you covering Deion Sanders wanting a quarterback with two parents in the family? Why are you talking about Roald Dahl's books being changed here and there throughout all of his works? Hundreds of changes, but throughout so many works. Can it really add up? And I say yes. I want you to think what these woke scolds would do to religion if they win. Sure, you can continue to practice your religion, but maybe we could take care of some problematic statements from your Bible and Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price. Maybe we can revise some of your oppressive church history and rewrite it to become more inclusive so that people looking back, in the future looking back, will be more aware of how much better things are now. Maybe we don't need a prophet condemning homosexuality. Maybe we don't need to be warned about 7 deadly sins because someone might be offended because they fall into a category. When do we say no? When do we say enough? When do we say stop? And this is the problem with conservatives, is we're highly liberal in that we're freedom loving and we're highly independent. And we don't collectivize as well. We don't come together to protest and to become activisty and to stand up and have our voices made heard so plain and clear. We don't. And that's a fault. That's something the left has on us. Because of their problems to be individuals, they come together really well into large groups to bully. But I'm done. Puffin Books is going to make a pretty penny off me because I'm going to buy these books before the changes are made and rolled out. My daughter, my grandkids are going to have these books in their original written state. Because Puffin's not just rewriting, but keeping the old. They're doing away with the old and everything's being changed to the new. This is 1984's complete revision of what was written. This is the bastardization of the publishing industry. This is the theft of our identity. And honestly, once kids start being shielded from things that are tough and problematic, what will they think of books that aren't edited down? How evil. How wrong. There will be no critical thought as to why a thing says what it says. This is the banality of evil. This is think of the children in action. That detestable political phrase that politicians, typically but not always on the left, trot out whenever they want to ban something. Because if we just thought of the children, then we would realize it's wrong and stop it. I'm mad. I'm mad. Because I love books. And even if you don't like books, you need to see what this is doing and what this will lead to. See, when you can just go in and change a book, you don't need to burn them like the Nazis did. You're just doing what Stalin and Mao did. You're changing history. You're changing ideas. You're corrupting the youth in the name of saving them. You evil bastards. Look around. Look at what's holy to you. And look at what they might change if they're given power. Don't let them do it. Thank you for listening. Peace out. Stand and fight.